Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today is June 4th and the whole garden is finally planted out. So today let's take a tour and see what's growing. This is a purple table grape. There's a man who walks by my front garden every day, and he gave it to me. He said he felt like this would give it a good home. The birds love these grapes, especially the catbirds and the cardinals. So I've set up some shelves, a table, and some chairs to give them a place to perch and enjoy their feast. They should be ready at the end of July. Now these are mini roses that I just rescued from the nearby historic old cemetery. After Mother's Day, it's a good time to dig through those trash cans and find old discarded plants. So I brought them home 2 weeks ago. They hardly had any leaves on them, but I planted them and look, they look so good. They're growing well. Now, I started growing in this garden 17 years ago, but got really serious about no-till 12 years ago when I was hit with rheumatoid arthritis. I had to find an easier way to garden. So in the fall, I take any old mulch or old plants and I scatter them around the garden and cover everything with cardboard. Then I top that with a new layer of mulch. So for 12 years, I've been building soil. Because everything under that cardboard breaks down. Means that this garden is about 1 foot taller than my neighbor's yards. Now back then I didn't have a lot of money, and that's one reason I used cardboard and for many years mulched with fall leaves because both of them were free. But the soil would erode. So I started using bricks to make a little wall to hold in the extra soil. Because I already had the bricks that came with the house. And we had a place that we could get some more for free. So basically, I started with free things in my garden to build rich soil. Now, one thing that's new this year are these super hoops. I wanted to protect the onions the whole growing season. Now, I have some low hoops, but the onion tops would always outgrow that size. And I need to protect them here in the heart of the city from digging animals, squirrels, skunks, and robins mainly. Those are my big three. And so far, I'm really liking this. Now, it does require the netting to be 10 feet wide. And let's open this up and see what's growing inside. Now, the first thing we planted mid-March were our onions. And we have 3 varieties. A red Italian flat, which will be ready mid-June. pretty soon. Walla Walla and a sweet yellow Spanish Utah onion. And those two will be ready in July. Now they've just started the bulbing up stage. But see how beautiful and big these green tops are? Those are my solar panels sucking in the sun's energy to grow big bulbs. Now, mid-April, we planted this broccoli rabe and got our first harvest at the very end of that month. And I'm growing this for Dale's salads. Now, which parts do I put in the salad? So I include the flower buds and the flowers. I have to put the netting back on to keep protecting the onions from the digging animals and the broccoli rabe from cabbage worms. Now we have one blueberry bush, and you do require more than one for pollination, but my neighbor has two. And this cage is to protect from the birds eating our berries. I love my birds, but I don't want to share the blueberries, and they will eat them green, so we never have a chance to harvest. But this will allow pollinators in to pollinate the berries. Now, blueberries do require watering. Most of the garden I don't have to water because I use a deep mulch. But blueberries have very shallow roots. I think this is its 4th year, and the first 2 years it grew really slowly because I didn't know to water it enough. Now every day I give it 2 to 3 gallons of water if it doesn't rain. And over here is our flower ring. In the spring, the first thing that grows are the beautiful yellow daffodils all around it. And in the middle, we have snowflakes and paper whites along the front. And interspersed are the irises in April, and then the purple alliums. But all of those are done. Next are going to be the gladiolas and lilies, about July. Now this area will be full of our California giant zinnias, planted mid-May, and in the middle of them, fennel. Butterflies, goldfinch, bees, and hummingbirds love zinnias. The swallowtail butterflies will lay their eggs in the fennel, and the caterpillars will eat the leaves. It's one of their host plants. And along this fence, we have our sunflowers. The variety is a multi-branching autumn beauty mix. Bees, goldfinch, cardinals love the sunflowers, and the squirrels too. They're gonna bloom really soon. And this whole area here is for our yellow summer squash. A straight neck and a crook neck variety. It's just gonna fill this whole space, and that's why I only planted 3 mid-May. And we're gonna start harvesting in just a couple of weeks. Now these onions were planted at the same time as the other onions, mid-March. But I do expect these bulbs to be bigger because they get more morning sun and afternoon sun. Overall, they get more sun right here. In front of the onions are our June-bearing strawberries, which actually started producing late April, and they've just finished. There's occasionally 1 or 2 that'll pop up. So now, every day, I look for and cut runners because I want the plants to grow bigger. I need to thin them out if they're getting crowded, and I need to fertilize them. And I'm going to use this organic berry tone. This area only has this one sunflower because I've reserved this space for okra. Now here in north central Maryland, if I want fresh okra, I have to grow it myself. But the challenge is, okra doesn't like nighttime temperatures below 65, and we're still having nighttime temperatures below 65. So I started these inside in mid-February because I wanted big, strong plants. And so far, it's been very successful. There's plenty of blossoms, and every day I'm getting 1 or 2 fruit. These were planted in mid-May. Now here's our simple compost ring. In the fall, I'll take the plant matter in here and chop and drop it around the garden and then lay cardboard on top. If there's any left over, I'll flip it onto the area that now has the zinnias. And then at the bottom, I'll harvest the compost that's ready. I've been doing this for years. Now along here is my favorite vegetable to grow, my sweet red peppers. These are Ivarski. They were planted just, I think, 1.5 weeks ago, and they've been suffering from the cold. You'll see some purple leaves that are actually falling off now, but it is growing new leaves because it's warming up. But it's interesting, there's one plant near the compost that has not suffered any cold damage, and it's because of the heat radiating off of this compost ring. Now, I do feed these cow mag because here we suffer from blossom end rot. All my neighbors do too. Next to the peppers are the Black Beauty eggplant. Those were planted 2 weeks ago, and they've just kind of been in limbo, waiting for the warm weather. And now they're starting to leaf out too. They're both going to be ready to harvest in July. Now, green peppers will be ready before that, but I prefer to wait until they turn red. When the onions are done in July, we'll take off these super hoops because the peppers and the eggplant, they don't need the netting, and it'll give more space to spread out. Now here in the alley is the grandkids' garden. And they just have a little bit of everything. And this is where we have a community shelf. It's where I give away free plants. Like right now, I have some strawberries I potted up, and I'm waiting for them to develop roots. Then I'll set them out on the shelf, and people will come get them for free. The grandkids were here last week and planted these. And these strawberries, I just moved from an area that I thinned, so they haven't yet developed their roots. The big leaves, they're going to die off, and new leaves will grow from the center. Over here, from our fall leaves, we bagged them up, and they're going to break down into soil. But it's going to take 2 years. So I think they'll be finished. They've already gone through the winter, and they'll be ready spring of 2026. Now I do have to water this garden every day if it doesn't rain. This bed is full of 4 years of composted quail bedding. Most of it's broken down. The newest that's in there is more than 1 year old. And in each planting hole, I do put in potting soil. I set this up in 2021. And every year I just added more and more compost to it. That's a young dove that's only been here a few days. There's several new doves. It hasn't yet figured out what to do when I'm walking through. Tomorrow I'll come back for part 2 of our garden tour. It's getting late and it's time for me to cook Dale's dinner. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today is June the 5th, and we're going to continue our garden tour. Yesterday we looked at that side of the garden, and today we're going to start over here, near the rain barrels. We only have one sunflower over here. And this poor thing gets stuck behind the door when it's open, but it still survives, and it is going to be smaller, but it will branch out and make plenty of flowers. Over here, we have 3 moringa trees. Now, it's not an ideal location because there's a lot of shade, but I don't need full production from these trees. It is a very bushy, fast-growing tree. Right now, they're struggling because it's been so cold. But soon, they're just going to explode with growth. And they're going to get more than 6 feet tall. And I use the greens. I harvest the leaves, and I make a green powder. I started them indoors and planted them out mid-May. Now along here we have more June-bearing strawberries. And just last week there was a strip right in front of me that I dug up, and I planted some in the grandkids' garden, but most of them I potted up. And I'm going to wait. I'm thinking it's going to be about a month for the roots to develop. Then I'll set them out on the community shelf free for my neighbors. The strawberries were right along here, and like I said, last week I potted them up. Now the big leaves, they're going to die off, and I'll trim them when that happens. And the middle is going to produce new growth. Now here are our cosmic purple carrots. Right here was my first sowing. And if you remember, the strawberries were in that corner and they just pushed out and blocked the germination of the rest of the carrots. And in the middle, it's where we're saving the fall carrots for seed. I think there were like 4 of them, and they really leafed out, also shading out the carrot seed. So only this corner germinated. But 2 weeks ago, I sowed some more. And they've sprouted. Now these first ones sown should be ready at the end of June. And the other ones probably a month or a month and a half later. Now back here, we have fall onions and beets that I overwintered, and they're going to seed. I've saved onion seeds before, but it's the first time for me to save beet seeds, and I'm so excited. Now this is our 3rd super hoop tunnel to protect our veggies from digging squirrels and cabbage worms. Let's open it up and see what's inside. Now the second vegetable we planted in late March were our Detroit dark red beets. Many of them are ready, and they're going to be harvested, all of them, by mid-June. And back here behind me are our Ace red cabbage. And I'm growing these for Dale's salads. Now they're not going to be ready at the same time as the beets. So after we harvest the beets, we'll leave some of these hoops and shorten this tunnel because the cabbage is going to need protection from the cabbage worms. They've started to head up. Now both of these started inside from seed, and after I transplanted them, I did water for about 7 days, but after that, I haven't had to water at all. The only thing I've had to do is weed out the morning glories. That is my biggest perennial weed. Now let's get this covered and protected because I've still seen the white cabbage butterflies around. Like I said, the beets are going to be harvested by mid-June, just in time for the blackberries to be ready. And these are thornless. Now here in this gap, I've planted 3 lemon cucumbers. They're a small round cucumber, and those will be ready in July, and 1 sunflower. And this right here is our fall red cabbage that we protected over winter, and it's now making seeds. They're going to be ready soon. We just have to wait for them to dry and harvest them, and then we'll take out this plant. And that will give more room for the stevia and the basil to bush out. Both were planted mid-May, just a couple of weeks ago. And over here is where I like to grow my lettuce. It gets less sun over here because these berries provide some shade. And I have the varieties of my own saved seed. So I have a red oak leaf that I've been growing for 12 or 13 years. Then I have a black-seeded Simpson lettuce and some kind of red leaf. It's possible it's a romaine. It came in a free lettuce mix. I also direct sowed some French breakfast radishes. Dale eats salad every day. And this is the last sunflower. Now it's going to be smaller because it doesn't get as much sun. But for watching the birds, you can sit up in the balcony and it's right here. So it's one of my favorite sunflowers in the garden. Then along here are our red raspberries. They're just starting to ripen now. And they're going to fruit twice, once now and later in August, September, and October until the first freeze. So they fruit twice. down here is a second mini rose. It's just like the other one that I rescued from the old historic cemetery. It was just left in a pot and it had dried out and it was in the trash. Now this morning after our walk, I came back and the other one had been dug up. A squirrel had dug it up. So I took the time to put down some hardware cloth to protect both of them. Now this area between the houses, Dale has christened Bumblebee Breezeway. Because the bees fly back and forth through here. Now my goal with this area is beauty, not high production. Because this area gets very limited sun. Only about 2 hours of direct sun every day. And because these row houses are so tall, I want to be able to look down and see all of this beauty. And along the fence is a porcelain berry vine. The birds love this thing. It is invasive. And I do pull them out of the garden. But the cardinals, they will nest here. Haven't done it this year yet, but last year there were 3 babies along here. Now I have 4 green stalk vertical planters. And I did modify them a little bit. So I have 4 with only 4 tiers. They come 5 tier and 3 tier, and they have a 7 tier too. I bought 2 5 tier and 2 3 tier, and I made 4 4 tier. Now these are our French marigolds, and the small flowers are periwinkle. Now these are summer flowers I grew for the green stalk, but I only planted half of them because the spring flowers aren't finished yet, and I left those. And I planted out 2 green stalk with the summer flowers. And I thought, well, what do I do with these? So I planted them here in these pots. Now, if you notice, I don't have the top water reservoir on here because the side of the house is sloped. And the green stalk watering system, where you pour water in and then it trickles through, won't work properly here. The back side will stay dry, so I just hand water myself. It's just too sloped. Now I like to plant 3 pockets with perennial greens and 3 pockets with annual flowers. Now the summer flowers that I have are petunias, marigolds, and periwinkle over on the other side. I change out the annual flowers every year. but the greens are year-round. In winter, they die back, but they come back to life in the spring. So we have Creeping Jenny, strawberries, and a variety of herbs. Herbs do really well on a green stalk. Now, these are the petunias and more periwinkle that I didn't plant yet. And later, when the spring flowers are finished, I'll plant those into the green stalks. The 2 green stalks with the spring flowers are still going because of less sun in this area and cool nights. Dale made this sign for me a few years ago. I just love it. The spring flowers that I took out of the summer green stalks, I saved and planted here, and they're doing well. Now let's go into the front garden. It's really small. Now these are what I call our porch pots. Any flowers I had left over, I planted in here. Now the pansies were planted in the fall, but the stalk and the snapdragons I planted for the spring, nesting birds in the area just picked them clean over and over again. The snapdragons are just tiny. The stalk did a little bit better. It's finally growing. I left in the spring flowers, but went ahead and planted the summer flowers, the leftover petunias. Now, I do deadhead all of my flowers to keep them blooming, except for the periwinkle. It does it for itself. Its flowers fall off naturally. That's one reason the pansies are still going. Every morning, I deadhead the old flowers. Now along here we have more sunflowers, but these are the mammoth variety, and they're only going to make one large head and probably get about 12 feet tall. They're really growing fast. And here are our determinate bush tomatoes. And I put the tunnel up because the birds were picking these clean too. Every time all the leaves got picked off and new leaves grew, they picked them off again. And they actually killed one of the tomatoes. And I had to replant it. So I think 2 are big enough now to leave uncovered. But the middle one, I'm going to leave the tunnel on because it's still pretty small. And along here are our spicy hot peppers, red cayenne and early jalapeno. They don't like the cold, but now they're really starting to grow new leaves and they're just going to bush out quickly. And luckily, the birds didn't touch them because they don't like the spicy peppers. And here are more of our French marigolds. Now, they're not as big as ones on the side because the birds were pecking the leaves off too. I finally covered them with a net. And they all survived except for one. We did lose one. That one right there. They're going to love all the sun in this front garden. This is the sunniest, warmest spot on our property. And over here are more plants I rescued from the cemetery. So there's petunias, and I thought the other ones were geraniums, but I'm not sure. But they are pretty, and they're all surviving. And the last thing in our garden are more strawberries all along the edge. But these are ever-bearing strawberries. They're just going to keep producing fruit, mostly in the spring and then again in the fall. This year they've given us huge berries. They've really done well. Now I finished the morning watering and I've pulled all the weeds, and now it's time to go up on the balcony and enjoy the garden and read. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to take a tour of the grandkids' garden. Now, just 2 weeks ago on the tour, this had just been planted that Memorial Day weekend, and wow, has it exploded in growth. This has the same plants that are planted in ground in the garden, but the size is different because the growing conditions are different. For example, these mammoth sunflowers in the corner, they're the exact same ones from the front garden, and those are massive already because they were planted earlier and they're in a much warmer, sunnier location. And these were planted later and they get less sun and they have more limited soil. Location, soil, the amount of water and light, it all makes a difference how your plants grow. Now, the grandkids' zinnias are still small, but they both have flowers, and they're going to keep growing and branching out. And tomatoes are always fun to grow with kids. Now, these are actually doing better than the ones in the front garden because birds haven't touched these. Remember the ones in the front? Nesting birds in the area just kept plucking off the leaves over and over again. But the birds never touched these. And the one on this side actually has some blossoms. Now, normally when I plant my sweet peppers, I'll take off any small fruit that's there. But I thought it would be fun to leave them because the grandkids would enjoy it. And they both had a pepper on it when they planted them, but one fell off in the storm. But the other one is actually turning red. Now, normally these sweet peppers are 7 inches, and this one's small because it developed before the pepper plant was transplanted. Letting kids plant and grow vegetables is a great way to introduce them to new foods. Not once do they complain, I don't want to plant that because I don't like it. No, they were thrilled to plant them all, and the eggplant is a perfect example. I doubt either one of them have ever even tasted eggplant, but they loved planting those, and they both have blossoms. And kids always love growing flowers and herbs. The beautiful colors and the wonderful smells, it's always a hit with kids. So both of the grandkids are growing marigolds, and marigolds are easy to grow. They're a great flower for kids. And not only do the petunias have beautiful color, they also smell heavenly. Now, I do deadhead these every day to keep them blooming. Basil's fun because you can use it to make their own pizzas, and it can be harvested often and keeps growing. Now last, I've planted strawberries all along the border because I've been thinning them out in the in-ground garden. And so far, they're still alive and growing. Now I do have to water this garden every day. Raised beds will require more water more often. come back tomorrow and we'll tour the other half of this back garden. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to continue our mid-June garden tour here along the right-hand side of the garden. Two days ago, we started along here, and I showed you what was going on in the left-hand side of the garden. Then yesterday, we visited the grandkids' garden out here in the alleyway. Now we're going to explore the other half of the garden back here. Now remember, from the first garden tour in early June, there's a sunflower growing behind this door, and it gets blocked whenever I'm outside working, but it's still growing. Let me show you. Now I like planting my strawberries along the edge because it makes it easier to harvest fruit and to check for runners to trim off. But this area was too thick. So recently I dug them all up, potted them up. In this small area, there were so many baby plants, and that's the reason our strawberries have become so small. So it's really hot right now from a heat wave, and it might not be the best time to pot up these strawberries, but we'll see how they do. I got 94 plants from just this 5 to 6 foot strip. That's way too many. Now, did you notice on the shelf that I was giving away free strawberries? Those were growing along here. And they were blocking the carrots and just really not getting enough sun to fruit. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, I potted them up and they've developed roots. So I'm ready to give them away to my neighbors. And I'm going to do the same with all of these. Share them with the community. The moringa is loving the heat. Up until last week, we were still having nights below 60, and that's why some of the leaves are yellow. But now with this heat wave, green growth has emerged, and these things are just going to get taller and taller really quickly, because in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be in the 90s, which isn't normal here for June. Now here are our purple cosmic carrots, and they're doing really well. I do keep these watered every day. I don't let them dry out. So we had 2 sowings, and the first sowing in this area hopefully will be ready this month. And the little second area, maybe a month and a half after that. And notice the flower in the middle from our fall carrot, making seeds. This netting dome protects them from digging animals. And by the way, I do need to weed in here. Last year's onion, it's done flowering. And now the seed pods have emerged. But they're not ready yet. They're still green. I am big on saving seeds. And here's our fall beets. And the seeds are so close to being ready. Both the onions and the beets have to go through 2 seasons. They have to go through the winter to make seeds. And all along here are our blackberries. Now they've got a little bit of pink and going to be ready in a few weeks. All of the beets we planted along here in March have been harvested. This gives us access for harvesting the blackberries. Now, do you see these tall blackberry canes? Those are for next year's berries. Letting them grow really tall and zip tying them to the trellis and then letting them flop over, and I'm going to root them in pots. And then snip them off to make new plants and share with my community. Because the tips, when they touch soil, will develop roots. And here's where I tied them to the trellis, and I'll cut that off. I need to get these zip tied up. And here are red acres cabbages. And the middle are forming heads. So let's get this open so we can see it better. We need to feel the heads. Are they firming up? They're still small, but they are tight. And look, blackberries look much better. I took care of those canes. The fall cabbage going to seed, they're almost ready. Just like the onions and the beets, they have to go through the cold winter. And I protected them below 25 degrees. Eventually, the raspberries are going to fill out this area. Probably next year or the year after. But for now, I'm growing lemon cucumbers and 1 sunflower. And I see we have our first fruit. Here we have 2 stevia plants. Look, the catbird's back. It loves that jelly feeder. Anyway, once these cabbage seeds are harvested, we'll take out this plant. And it'll give these stevia room to bush out. And when I'm finished filming, I'm going to do a harvest, and we're going to harvest some of this. That'll help it to bush out also. And here are our basil. I like to have these near the kitchen, the stevia too. They really would prefer more sun because this area gets shaded from the raspberry some, but they'll get big enough for me. And along this strip, I tend to grow lettuce. And we have some radishes. Again, easy access to the kitchen, and more shade helps the lettuce last longer. Now these two sunflowers in this area haven't opened yet, and they are smaller because they get less sun, but near the balcony where we can watch the birds, because the goldfinch will flock to these sunflowers. That's the biggest reason I grow them. Then all along here are our red raspberries, and right now they're in fruit, and they're going to fruit again in the fall. They're also sending up new young canes, and that's going to be where the fall fruit develops, so it's different from the blackberries. So the fruit right now was on the canes that were there in the fall last year. They fruited last fall and this spring, and the ones growing right now will fruit in the fall and then next spring. The canes the fruit is currently on, they're going to die back, and I'll cut them out. You have to know the habits of your plants. Yesterday I made a really big harvest of the raspberries, but by this afternoon, more are going to be ripe from the heat. And down here is my second mini rose. I rescued it from the cemetery. It was almost dead with no leaves, but look, it has some buds. The other one too. 2 days ago when I filmed, I didn't notice the bud, but now it's starting to open. Come back tomorrow where we're going to tour the side garden, what we call Bumblebee Breezeway. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to continue our mid-June garden tour here along the side of the house between the row houses in what we call Bumblebee Breezeway. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to tour the front garden. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's time for a July garden tour. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time for an August garden tour. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.